My business partner told me, "You're not on the paperwork anymore." I smiled and said, "Congrats." Then I opened my email and forwarded one message. By lunch, everyone knew the truth. At 38, I was a man running operations for a small branding studio in Richmond, Virginia. My business partner, Troy Mallory, was 31, and we'd built the company together for 4 years. Half our equity, a 3-year studio lease, and a $45K line of credit sat in my name. When Troy started calling me a thief to clients, I chose myself. Most mornings started the same in the fan. I walked my coffee down Hanover Avenue and unlocked our studio. The space smelled like printer ink and cedar shelves. I liked routines that matched receipts and promises. I kept 2 things on my desk like guardrails: a brass heron letter opener and a cracked green binder. The letter opener was heavy and cold in my palm. The binder's spine split, but it held everything. I wasn't the visionary between us. Troy could sell fog to a lighthouse. I was the one who made sure rent cleared. I made sure contractors got paid on time. On Saturdays, I'd take my niece to Belle Isle. We counted the flat rocks and skipped the sharp ones. On Sundays, I ran numbers at my kitchen table. My spreadsheet lived next to the green binder. Troy teased me for that binder. He called it my security blanket with a grin. I laughed because it was easier than pushing back. That was my flaw, and it mattered later. We named our company Kestrel and Pike Creative. It sounded bigger than 2 people and a rented studio. Our clients were local, steady, and proud. A bakery in Carytown, a nonprofit in Shockoe Bottom. We didn't live lavishly. We just paid ourselves $82K each and kept a cushion. That cushion made me breathe easier. I grew up watching overdraft fees eat my parents alive. One Monday in late spring, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number from North Carolina. A recruiter spoke fast and cheerful. She said, "We want you in-house, director level." I stepped onto the loading dock behind the studio. The alley smelled like rain and diesel. She laid out the offer in clean numbers. 148,000 base, 18,000 bonus target, 401K match at 6%, 3 remote days each week. A signing bonus of $12K paid within 10 business days. The job was in Charlotte, but they'd cover relocation. Up to $10K in reimbursed expenses. I stared at the brick wall across the alley. My throat tightened in a way that felt like relief. I said, "Send it in writing." She said, "It's already in your inbox." That night, I met Troy at Juniper and Slate Cafe in Carytown. We sat near the window while the streetlights warmed. I slid my phone across the table. He read the offer letter and blinked twice. He didn't look proud. He looked cornered. He said, "That's cute, corporate babysitting." I said, "It's stability and a step up." He shook his head like I'd insulted him. He said, "You'll fold in 6 weeks." I tried to keep it calm. I said, "We can plan the transition." He leaned in, voice sharp but quiet. He said, "Or you can sell me your half cheap." My ears went hot. I said, "Not cheap, fair." Troy laughed once, no warmth in it. He said, "Fair is whatever I decide." We walked out into Cary Street air. A street musician played something soft and off-key. I told myself it was just stress talking. I told myself we'd work it out. The next day in Scott's Addition, I found Troy already inside. He'd rearranged the desks. My chair was pushed against the wall. His chair sat centered like a throne. On my desk, the cracked green binder was missing. So was my brass heron letter opener. I didn't panic yet. I asked, "Did you move my stuff?" Troy didn't turn around. He said, "I cleaned up. It was clutter." I opened the supply cabinet and found the binder. He jammed it behind toner boxes. The heron letter opener lay on top, scratched. I picked it up and set it back on my desk. I said, "Don't touch my things." He said, "Don't be precious." That afternoon, a client called with a stiff voice. It was Marable from the Carytown bakery. She said, "We need to pause the rebrand." I said, "Did something happen?" There was a pause, then a sigh. She said, "Troy said you were siphoning funds." My stomach dropped, then steadied. I said, "That's not true." Marable's voice softened but stayed wary. She said he sounded convinced. He said he had proof. I wrote her name on the green binder's front pocket. I said, "Give me 24 hours." After that call, 2 more came in. One from the nonprofit, one from a wedding venue. Each one carried the same poisoned line. I was the one stealing, Troy was the one fixing it. By 7:20 p.m., I sat alone in the studio. The overhead lights buzzed like they were annoyed at me. I opened the green binder and flipped through tabs. Rent, payroll, vendors, equipment, taxes. The numbers were neat because I made them that way, but I'd let Troy handle the client billing system. That was the deal we'd fallen into without writing. He charmed clients, I kept the machine running, I logged into our accounting portal. My password didn't work. I tried again, slower, still locked out. I called Troy, he didn't answer, I texted, "I can't access the books." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He finally called back, he said, "You don't need access anymore." I kept my voice even, I said, "We're equal owners, restore access." He laughed like I'd made a joke, he said, "You're leaving anyway, don't make it messy." I stared at the brass heron letter opener. Its beak pointed at my phone like an accusation. I said, "Stop telling people lies." He said, "Stop acting like a saint." That night I didn't sleep much, I made lists instead. I wrote them on yellow paper tucked inside the binder. Steps, dates, names, questions. By morning I did 3 things before breakfast. I called my bank, my attorney, and our leasing office. The bank confirmed the $45K credit line existed. It also confirmed $17,400 had been drawn. My mouth went dry. I asked for the transaction details. The clerk read the memo line slowly. Studio build-out materials. I knew every build-out material we'd bought. I had ordered them myself. I went to a branch on Broad Street at 1010 a.m. The air inside smelled like carpet cleaner. I asked for printed statements and a withdrawal history. The teller slid them over with a polite smile. I slipped the papers into the green binder. I held the binder like a shield on the walk back. Then I called our landlord near Monument Avenue. The property manager sounded tired. She said, "Your partner asked about removing you." I said, "That can't happen without both of us." She hesitated, then said, "He sounded confident." I said, "Please email me the lease amendment requests." That email became the first thread in a rope. I didn't yank it yet. I just held it. At noon, I met Nora Finch in her downtown office. Her suite overlooked Capitol Square. Nora was calm in a way I envied. She listened without interrupting. I set the brass letter opener on her conference table. It looked ridiculous there, like a fancy weapon. I opened the green binder and laid out documents. Operating agreement, lease, past invoices, vendor contracts. Nora tapped the binder's cracked spine. She said, "You're organized, that helps." I told her the smear was spreading. I told her I was moving to Charlotte. Nora didn't react to the relocation part. She reacted to the credit line draw. She said, "We locked down accounts today." I said, "Can we do that without blowing up?" Nora met my eyes. She said, "You're already in an explosion. You're choosing where to stand." We set boundaries in writing that afternoon. Nora drafted a notice of dispute and a demand for records. She also drafted a request for a neutral audit. It wasn't revenge, it was containment. By 4:40 p.m., she'd emailed me a packet to sign. I signed with the pen I kept clipped inside the binder. That night, I visited the studio and changed my routine. I took photos of the equipment and serial numbers. I did it quietly, no drama. A camera click isn't a tantrum. I made an inventory list on paper and dated it. I tucked it under the binder's vendor tab. Over the next week, I acted like I was normal. I still answered calls. I still showed up. But I stopped giving Troy verbal updates. Everything went through email or Nora. Every 2 days, I walked to Libby Hill Park after work. I'd sit on the slope and watch the lights. I timed my breathing to the traffic below. I told myself calm was not weakness. Troy kept performing for whoever watched him. He brought in a freelancer and called her my new team. He told the landlord I'd abandoned the lease. He told clients I'd confessed to bad bookkeeping. One evening, he cornered me in the studio kitchen. He held a takeout bag from a place on Main Street. He smiled like we were friends again. He said, "Let's be adults." I said, "Send the books and stop lying." He said, "I'll send what you need." He stepped closer, voice low and sharp. He said, "Sell me your half for $9K. I almost laughed. Our equipment alone was worth $28K. I kept my hands on the green binder. I said, "No." His face tightened. He said, "Then I'll ruin you." I didn't raise my voice. I said, "You're already trying." The next day, a client forwarded me a message Troy had sent. It accused me of falsifying invoices. That accusation was sloppy and it mattered, because invoices were the one thing I never let go. I went back through my vendor folder in the binder. I found a pattern I'd missed. 3 purchases I didn't recognize. A rush fee, a hardware bundle, and consulting support. All billed from a vendor I'd never met. Seabright Media Supplies, which sounded fake. I called the vendor number on the invoice. A man answered with a bored hello. I asked for their address. He stuttered, then gave a P.O. box. Nora's face stayed neutral when I told her. She said, "This is classic. We document, we don't accuse." So we did document. We requested bank images of the payments. We requested the vendor onboarding form. We requested the contract for consulting support. Troy kept delaying. He kept insisting he was protecting the business. He also had a second motive, and I saw it late. He'd been courting an investor behind my back, a local guy with deep pockets and shallow patience. I'd met him once at a Canal Walk night market. The investor liked Troy's big talk. He didn't like me asking about margins. Troy wanted me gone, so the story stayed simple. He also needed my name off the debt. The smear wasn't just spite. It was strategy mixed with panic. 2 weeks later, Nora scheduled mediation. It was voluntary, cheaper than court and faster. The mediation took place in a beige office near Bayard Park. A water cooler hummed like it had opinions. Harold Cates, the mediator, shook my hand first. His grip was dry and firm. Troy arrived wearing a new watch. He didn't look at me. Harold explained the rules and time limits. He said, "Each of you gets 45 minutes uninterrupted." I opened my green binder on the table. Troy glanced at it and smirked. Harold asked Troy to go first. Troy launched into a speech about trust and harm. He said, "Marcus was unstable," he said. "He made vendors nervous." Harold nodded without agreeing. He asked, "Do you have documentation?" Troy slid a single printout forward. It was an invoice with my name typed at the bottom. I leaned in and saw the problem. The invoice number didn't match our numbering system. I didn't gloat. I just looked at Harold. Harold asked, "Where did this come from?" Troy said, "From our records." Nora spoke softly. She said, "We requested records. We didn't receive them." Harold turned to me. He said, "Your turn." I kept it simple. I said, "I want the truth, clean and written." Then I slid 3 items across the table. Bank withdrawal images, vendor lists, and our actual invoice sequence. Harold studied the papers. The room got quiet, like even the water cooler listened. Troy's jaw flexed. He said, "That's out of context." Nora didn't bite. She said, "We can provide full context. We asked repeatedly." Harold asked Troy 2 direct questions. He asked, "Who approved these vendor entries?" Troy's eyes flicked to the door. He said, "We both did." Harold asked, "Then why is Marcus locked out?" Troy said, "Security." Harold exhaled slowly. He said, "Security works both ways." Mediation didn't end with a hug. It ended with signatures. Troy agreed to restore access within 24 hours. He agreed to a third-party audit paid from company funds. He agreed to a non-disparagement clause with a penalty. $2,500 per verified violation, capped at $20K. He also agreed to freeze the credit line. No new draws without both signatures. We also set a buyout pathway, a valuation using past 12 months' revenue, not feelings. Troy tried to talk in the hallway after. He said, "Why are you doing this?" I held the brass heron letter opener in my pocket. The metal steadied me. I said, "Because you lied." He said, "You forced my hand." I didn't argue that. I just walked away. The payoff didn't come from yelling. It came from the audit. The auditor's report arrived 9 days later. I opened the envelope with the letter opener at my kitchen table. The report named Seabright Media Supplies as a shell vendor. Payments flowed to an account in Troy's name. Total diverted $16,980, plus late fees that hit our real vendors. I didn't celebrate. I felt a dull sadness like finding rot under paint. Nora sent a formal demand letter. It required repayment, revised ownership terms, and a release. Troy's investor backed away quietly. Not because I hunted him down. Because auditors don't care about charm. Numbers make their own noise. Clients didn't flood my phone with apologies. They just started emailing neutral questions. I answered each one calmly. I said, a third-party audit corrected the record. I didn't attach the report. I offered a call and a confirmation letter. Marable from Carytown emailed me later. She wrote, I'm sorry I doubted you. I accepted that without squeezing it for drama. Trust, once bruised, needs space. The buyout finished in early summer. Troy paid me for my half in structured payments. First payment, $34K, wired by deadline. Second payment, $34K, 2 weeks later, also on time. The final payment landed 30 days after that. It completed the valuation at $102K for my share. I closed the studio lease with the landlord. They transferred it to Troy alone. I packed my desk in one cardboard box. The green binder went on top. Before leaving, I stood in the empty studio. I listened to the building settle around me. I didn't feel defeated. I felt unburdened. I moved to Charlotte with the job offer intact. I rented a small place near Noda. My new office was all glass and badge scanners. I hated the fluorescent lights at first, but I loved my paycheck hitting on schedule. Every other Friday, exact and predictable. I set a simple financial milestone. Pay off my old student loan balance within 10 months. With the signing bonus and steady salary, I did it. I watched the balance hit zero and sat quietly. At work, I found my win in a strange place. A supply chain issue threatened a product launch. People panicked in meetings. I stayed boring and methodical. I built a timeline, called vendors, rerouted shipments. We saved $220K in rush fees. My director emailed me the next day. She wrote, "You're the calm we needed." I printed that email and tucked it in the binder, not as proof for anyone else, just for me. Back in Richmond, the consequences kept spreading. Troy's world tightened without me touching it. The landlord demanded personal guarantees from him. The bank refused to extend the credit line. A couple of freelancers stopped answering his calls, not because I warned them, because late checks make their own reputation. That's how passive truth works. Troy tried to contact me in fall. He called during my lunch break at 12:35. I let it go to voicemail. His message sounded like rehearsed pain. He said, "We should talk like adults." I deleted it. 2 weeks later, he emailed again. He said, "We can rebuild what we had." I replied once. I said, "Please contact my attorney for business matters." Near the end of winter, Troy showed up in Charlotte. He waited outside my office building. I recognized him immediately. Same smile, less confidence. He stepped toward me on the sidewalk. He said, "Can we get coffee?" I kept distance without making a scene. I said no. His smile cracked. He said, "You're really going to be like this?" I thought about the green binder. I thought about the scratched letter opener. I said, "You made choices. So did I." He said, "I was under pressure." I didn't debate his pressure. I just protected my peace. I said, "Don't come here again." He said, "You're cold." I walked inside and badged through the gate. He stayed outside with his hands in his pockets. In early spring, exactly 1 year after that first client call, I took a breath. I opened the green binder at my kitchen counter. I kept those papers for one reason. Closure likes details. Here are the 3 lines I never forgot. Invoice line. Vendor setup fee, Seabright Media Supplies, $1,200 invoice line. Consulting support, 4-day sprint, $7,800 invoice line. Rush hardware bundle, 2 units, $3,600. Those lines weren't dramatic on their own. They were just the truth in plain clothes. That same week, Troy sent a final message. It arrived late at night, but I read it in the morning. He wrote, "I'm sorry for what I did." He wrote, "I got scared and chose control." He wrote, "You didn't deserve any of it." He wrote, "I hope you're doing well." I didn't write a novel back. I replied with one sentence. I wrote, "I accept your apology and I'm moving forward." After that, I went for a walk in No-Da. The air smelled like grilled onions from a food truck. I bought a coffee and sat on a bench. I felt calm, clean, and finished. I learned something simple that year. When someone rewrites you as a villain, stay factual. My rule now is boring but solid. If my name is on it, I keep access and copies. If I could redo one part, I'd confront earlier. Silence can look like permission to the wrong person. I still use the brass heron letter opener daily. It reminds me to open things carefully. The cracked green binder sits on a shelf behind my desk. It reminds me that order can outlast chaos. Peace didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived with boundaries, paperwork, and a quiet mind.